is also my co-founder and fiance. She was breaking out in hives to one of the lotions she was using, and from that we made our first product, which is our body butter. We've since expanded the line, so we have a variety of moisturizers, soaps, and all kinds of things like that.
It looks like they didn't hear us before. Should we do those intros again?
Am I not on? Was I don't think.
Start that over. Do you guys remember who you are? Okay, good.
Yes.
I don't think is my mic on now? I don't
Yes.
think it was on before.
Check. Can you hear? Everybody's all good? Panel mics are low. Not showing there, but we are live. Okay, good.
Great. Okay.
So we'll start a little bit of that over. So pretend like you guys didn't hear it at the first time. And I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Danielle Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Spark FM Online and Perfect Radio Station here in Boston. That was created to empower and amplify the voices of the community. And I'm joined again with my friends, Shelly and Jay. And we'll let Shelly introduce herself, followed by Jay.
All right. I can hear myself now, so I think that's good. I'm Shelly. I am VP of Strategy and Analytics at Hydro. We make connected fitness rowing machines. I also said that that's a big deal right now because Peloton just came out with their new rower. And again, I will spend all day telling you how much ours is better, cheaper, faster shipping, all of these really good things. Past lives, I was at Wayfair, Department of Homeland Security, Harvard Business Review, a handful of different industries and roles. Pass it over to Jay.
Great. I am Jay Weeks. I'm the co-founder of Organic Bath Co. with my partner Gian Doherty, who's not here, but we make organic skin and body care products you can feel good about using, all with organic ingredients and fair trade. We have a wide variety of moisturizers and soaps and things like that. And we started when my partner was actually breaking out in hives to one of the lotions she was using. And we realized how unregulated the personal care industry is. So we started with our first product, which was our organic body butter, and have since expanded the line. And so that's a bit about us.
All right. So we are dealing with some really great businesses and some unique areas that we'll touch upon right now. So we'll just get right into the conversation and get on with what are some of the key metrics that you should be looking out for in business. And in perspective, we have bigger products with services, and we also have smaller products with also services. So we just wanted to kind of distinguish that and tell us how you guys work through those.
Sure, I can kick that off. A couple of the metrics that we look at when we're measuring customer engagement, one would be Net Promoter Score. So if you're not familiar with is everyone familiar with Net Promoter Score?
Even if we're not, remind
Just looking
us.
at nodding heads. Net Promoter Score is basically how likely are you to recommend this product or service to a friend or family member or colleague? And that's typically done on a 1 to 10 scale. And it's a good substitute for word of mouth. So it's hard to measure word of mouth, but using Net Promoter Score, you can see how likely are people to recommend your product, and it's a good substitute for understanding word of mouth. So typically, we look at Net Promoter Score as one kind of key metric to see how our customers are enjoying our products. Another thing is customer satisfaction. So we do a lot with our customer service. We'll send a survey out after every customer service interaction. And typically, the way you measure customer satisfaction is on a 1 to 5 scale. And you just say, how satisfied were you with Organic Bath or the service you received today? And typically, you want kind of you want to hit in the mid 4s on average or up to, make sure that your customer service interactions are, positive.
Yep, all of those are great. And then I would add some behavioral metrics as well, whether that's from the very top of the funnel, how your marketing CAC is doing, so cost of acquiring a customer. So that's how efficient are you at your messaging, at your marketing. And then the behavioral metrics of your actual customers. So our engagement team does a great job at outlining how many times does a member work out per day, per week, per month, per year, because that's going to be one of the best leading indicators of churn, which is, of course, another really important metric that we track over time, and is very important to investors, of course. And then thinking about, how many times do people, if you're in a repeat purchase business, how many times do people repeat purchase? How often do they repeat purchase? I'm remembering back at Wayfair, how many different categories do they purchase? Which do they sell more? Do you sell more if you buy a couch first or a pillow first? There's a lot of really cool, interesting behavioral analytics there.
One of the questions that just came to my mind from that is when you're doing these customer service and you have like a 1 to 10 scale, when you get those lower numbers, like what does that do? And what is like the immediate thing that you do to recognize them? Because some of the times you're like, another customer unsatisfied. Or sometimes you're like, oh no, what did I do? So like how do you guys kind of deal with that?
Yeah, I can, talk to that a little bit. So you almost want to preempt that. So a big part of it is just resolving the actual issue that the customer had to begin with. So an example that comes to mind for me is we ship our body butters in glass jars, and we had a
Environmentally
customer.
friendly.
Yeah. So we had it, but that can lead to breakage. So we had a customer who emailed us and said, "Oh, well, I just want to let you know this broke, and maybe the way you're packing it isn't right." And your first response would be, "Oh, hey, I'm going to be really defensive and go, no, 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 we pack these great. I don't know what you're talking about." But the second thing is, oh, well, maybe she's right. So let's look at how we're packing it. And we actually changed our process just from that one customer interaction. And we shipped her a new product, and she was happy. But that's just one thing. So you can preempt it by making sure that you're actually addressing the issue, as opposed to
Dismissing
lip
it.
service to people. The other thing is, when you do have one of those, you can reach out to the person and say, "Hey, what could we have done?" Because a lot of times when people just give you negative feedback, they don't always give you the why. They'll just give you the, "Oh yeah, I had a terrible interaction." And we're fortunate that we don't have a lot of that. But when we do, we always reach back out and say, "Hey, is there something we could have done better?" Because a lot of times you'll uncover those opportunities to fix things, and that will improve your customer engagement all across the board. So
Absolutely. Do you want to and then so that's great. And thank you for saying that. This leads right into the next question. So when you are getting some of those reports and you're getting back great metrics and you're getting large followers and you're growing very big, or even when you're first starting out and your numbers might not be all of that great, how do you not get caught up in vanity metrics? And vanity metrics sounds exactly what it is. It's numbers that might not be completely true. They might be the fluffed up numbers or anything like that. And there was a couple of definitions that went around. So yeah, let's start with you, Shelly.
I think NPS and customer satisfaction are obviously very important. I think some people can take them as vanity metrics sometime if they don't do it right. So some watch outs I would have there are making sure you're tracking it over time with the right people, that you're getting enough responses, again, from the right people. You want to get a little bit of everybody. A downfall I've seen is if you measure it once and then call it a day. NPS will change over time, especially if you're a startup. Usually your early adopters are going to be the most happy. And so you really want to
product.
exactly. So you really want to measure that over time so you can see how that sentiment changes.
yeah, and I would say, a lot of the vanity metrics that people get excited about are things like social media followers, or traffic to your website, or even the size of your email list, or any of those things where you're measuring a quantity of people, but you're not measuring any kind of engagement metrics. So, traffic to your website is great. Are people buying? Or are they engaging with your product? Or yeah, they might, log on once and then not, they might log in a bunch of times but not actually engage. So I think looking at especially those things where there's a quantity of people associated with it. What is the engagement with that?
What is the buying rate?
Yeah.
Especially for smaller business. Like, are they so many people on my website? Nobody's buying anything.
Yeah.
I'm
and
just
then
gonna record
why?
these numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you guys ever seen that or had to deal with that?
I've seen one example. So actually, traffic is an example. I've seen an example where we purchased a lot of leads for email lead gen.
Yeah.
So we had a huge list, but we were buying them from some random, not random company. I'm sure it was a reputable company, but they just weren't quality leads. They weren't the right audience for us at the time. So they weren't converting to
Yeah.
the same degree that organic traffic was. So that was a watch out area.
Yeah.
And that also leads into the next one about customer churn. And do you guys I have the actual definition of it, but do you guys want to let's start with that definition, and then you can give the definition of how it works inside of your business. So churn rate, sometimes known as attrition rate, is the rate at which customers stop doing business with the company over a given period of time. Churn may also apply to the number of subscribers who cancel or don't renew a subscription. The higher your churn rate, the more customers stop buying your business. So, when we're talking about churn with both of your businesses, how has that been going?
I can start. So we think about churn at a monthly level and then also at an annualized level. So at a monthly level, the calculation is really how many people left our subscription divided by how many people were active at the start of that month. So that's the monthly view. You can then do the same thing for annual, but because it's much harder to track I guess you could do a rolling 12-month basis. There's also some shortcuts to translate your monthly churn to annual. You can Google that. So that's really what we do. We track that every month to see how many people left, how many people reactivated, and we get that churn number. And then one of the things we do is then benchmark that versus our competitors, at least the ones that are public. So I do have Peloton's numbers that I'd be happy to talk about. Again, they're public, so I can do that.
Great. Yeah, so churn for us is a little bit different. We do have a subscription service. So the way that we kind of look at churn is a little bit different than, a connected fitness device would be. But for us, we do have subscribers. So we have people who repeat purchase, whether that's every month or every 2 or 3 months. So we will look at churn rates very similar to what you mentioned based on those. You can also look just in general at churn for an e-commerce company as the number of customers who repeat purchase in a year. So you can kind of do a similar calculation with e-commerce businesses because not every product is consumable. So in our case, it is. So it does make sense to have a subscription, but a lot of churn might not be as applicable to you if you have a one-time sale product. But in that case, you could also measure things like, word of mouth, NPS, stuff like that, that even if you're not selling the same product multiple times to the same consumer, at least you have some other metrics you can track there.
I remember a part of our conversation earlier. This is for you, Shelley. Even when you're talking about churn, you're also looking at how active people are within the service app or anything. How do you positively affect that, or how do you use that to help the business?
Right. So I've seen this in multiple businesses and industries where the number of times that someone uses your service is a almost perfect correlation with whether or not they're going to churn. So if they stop using your subscription, they're likely going to churn. Maybe not perfect correlation, but very likely. So then you, as a leading indicator of churn, you want to measure, okay, who has stopped using my service this month? Can I contact them? Can I email them? Reaching out proactively definitely reduces churn, even if it's just an email. Like you don't have to have someone call. Though calling does tend to be more effective.
Why are you not using it?
Yeah. And then I know Jay also has some ideas of like, then that leads to how many there's a bunch of reactivation campaigns you could do. There's a bunch of offers you can do. Maybe there's some offboarding you can do if your subscription actually has like an end date. And we can keep chatting about those ideas, but I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say, in terms of focusing on how do we reduce churn, one of the things that we'll do is if somebody cancels, we'll just ask them, hey, why are you canceling? Because a lot of times it could be, oh, well, I have too much product sitting, or, oh, I don't need it this month. And so a lot of times we'll say, oh, okay, well, do you want to push it back, or do you want to change the frequency? And I think a big part of that on a consumable basis is making sure that you're measuring the usage rates. So like, as an example for us, if you're ordering a body wash refill and you're a single person, you're probably not going to need it every month. But if you're a family of 4, you might need, 1 or 2 every month. So it really just depends on, making sure that they're set up with the right usage rate so that they're not over ordering or under ordering, because you really want to have, especially for something like body wash where you're, presumably you're showering, at least multiple days a week, that you would use body wash, at a fairly consistent rate. So that's just one example of kind of how we.
And then that question was, in general, like, how do you avoid the churn? Like, how do you even just, once you see it, that it might be decreasing or increasing, like, how do you avoid that churn? And some of the things that we talked about before was like IG versus TikTok. And I don't remember what that was. Do you remember what that was?
I think that was Jay, but I have a different example. So if you do hear from customers, so our product team reaches out to members, maybe I think once a month, once a quarter, just to conduct member interviews to see like, what do you like? What do you dislike about the product? Because if you're seeing people decrease the use of your product over time, that means something's not sticking with them. So then you can understand their pain points. So for example, one of the things I know at Hydro we did was add a pause button to our videos because A, Peloton had it, and B, like, oh, what if your kid runs into the middle of your workout and you really need to pause? We didn't have a pause button, so then we could add that. And so listening to members, hearing what they have so that you can improve the customer experience so that way it does become stickier.
Data.
Yeah. Another example may be learning to row is hard for some people. And so we have a pretty good learn to row series, but we need to make sure that people see that.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate a lot of the things that I said before, just around engaging with customers. So any kind of customer service interaction that you have, or just listening to people on social media, so you can kind of see, what are people saying about the product, and looking at your reviews is a big thing. So if you are getting reviews on your website, a good thing is to look at when people have, positive reviews or negative reviews. A lot of times there's still feedback in there. So just kind of aggregating all that feedback and then actually taking action on it would be.
How well do you guys know your customers from your data and everything? Do you feel like you have a good handle on who your customers are, your target market, so you're not like dipping and diving in places that you might not fare well in? How do you pay attention to that?
Yeah, so I think we have a really good idea of who our customer is, and we know, we know a lot of our repeat customers. We know a lot of them by name. We'll say, oh, such and such a person, because we'll interact with them somewhat regularly. So I try and jump into. I don't handle all the day-to-day customer service, but I'll try and jump in every once in a while and respond to a ticket. And we have, the way it's set up, that's not disruptive. But then I can kind of go through and say, hey, just to get a feel of what's going on. So, I'm not responding to every ticket, but it's a good way to get a feel for your customers. So, beyond things like surveys and understanding why people use the product, and really just asking those questions. So even, you can survey people, but then you can also just chat with them one-on-one, and do customer interviews and things like that to get a better sense of why people buy from you.
And yes, and one of the things that I've seen become really interesting, this is actually one of my favorite topics, is especially as your organization gets bigger, the sales and marketing team might have different customer types that they want to acquire, but maybe the product team has different personas that they want to build different features for. And then there's the customer service team that does the actual like talking to your members. So one of my favorite topics is like, yes, everyone has a different slice of the pie. How do you get everyone to share each of their slices of the pie? So one of the things that I really like that we do at Hydro, every Friday we have an all company meeting, and there's always a quote from a customer of like how Hydro changed their life. There's also like a voice of the customer meeting. I believe that's like monthly or quarterly where there's deeper dives. So I love when we actually get to share those different findings across departments.
It's great.
Because I do believe in that. I think that customers definitely like to feel like they have a communication portal to the company, even if it's big or small. We always feel like if like Facebook, oftentimes people are, a little frustrated because it's like I can't talk to anybody. And I feel like that also sometimes takes away from, the company's quality of churn and retaining customers. Going right into it are sometimes you are seeing what your customers need and you want to kind of incentivize them or kind of jumpstart their energy for the product again. What are some possible ad hoc interventions that you guys have used to re-engage with customers who might have fallen off or not as active or not buying?
Yeah. So, you can do a lot with re-engagement campaigns. So things where you're re-engaging past customers. Some of that might be discount oriented. Some of that might just be a touch base. One thing we did recently was we sent out direct mail, actually, and we got a roughly 9x ROI on that campaign just from sending out direct mail to people who hadn't bought from us. So we basically did it between 30 days and 6 months. They hadn't purchased anything in the last 30 days, and the last time they had purchased was less than 6 months ago, and that was almost 10 times ROI on that campaign. And that's just one example of something that we've done recently where you're re-engaging with your existing customer base, and just it was just reminding them that we're there. And so for us, if someone's not on a subscription, you do need to constantly, there's so much noise out there that you do need to find different ways. We could have run social media ads and people would have ignored them. So something about receiving a physical, piece
People
of mail.
love coupons.
Yeah.
Coupons.
Look at Bed Bath and Beyond, although they're not doing great right now. But how many
Those
Bed Bath and
20%?
Beyond? Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone's got one of those 20% coupons somewhere in there.
Got a
now,
coupon. Shelly, for you.
We're actually thinking through this right now. So I won't give away too many secrets, but some of the things that I've seen in the past that has not worked, or maybe it works temporarily, is let's say giving away free product or free months. That can work temporarily, but maybe all you're doing is just delaying the churn. So definitely recommend, how do you test something, A/B test it, and then see if it works or not. So I think, maybe if you want to try a free month, just see if you could try to reactivate them to get them active. But really, that's the core of it. It's like
Yeah.
you can give them a free month or a free product, but are they actually going to use it to build that habit again that they're going to keep using it?
I'm glad that you brought that up, the habit of getting customers back into the habit after they've fallen off of, I don't want to say the falling off the wagon. No, we don't want to fall off the
People
wagon.
do that in
Yeah,
fitness.
they
little
do. How do you get them back into the habit? So I'm assuming that you send out a direct mail and they're latched on, but they're like, I got a coupon, so that's why I bought it. But how do you kind of reel them back in? Like, come back.
One of the favorite things that I think we do at Hydro is they're both for our members, and they also help to increase engagement. As we have Commit to Fit. I don't want to call them competitions, but I can't think challenges. That's the best word. Yeah. You're challenging you're competing with yourself, not necessarily with other people. So that like puts it front of mind and gets them engaged. And then you can get a sticker and maybe a pair of socks at the end. You get little blue dots on your activity metrics. It's a little bit gamifying it, but also like remind them why they want to do this and then reward them, even if it's something digital.
Best tools that you guys use to track your customers, that you can get this data, you can always rely on it. Apps, what would you recommend as the best tools to measure these things?
This is not really exactly a tool, but when I was preparing for this talk, if you Google Profitwell churn benchmarks, Profitwell is a vendor that I've used in the past. They have churn benchmarks. So you can see for your industry, for your price point, for your even fundraising amount, what the expected monthly churn is. They calculate it a little bit different than we do now, but it's still really helpful. So I would definitely Google that. Unfortunately, you have to give them your email, so they might try to pitch you something afterwards as a fair warning, but the benchmarks are really helpful. So I would recommend doing that because benchmarking is very important. Other than that, like, and I can imagine my engagement team right now saying, the better data you have on your members, on your subscribers, the better you're able to track and then therefore improve churn, improve your metrics, improve your how well you know your customers. So that's a tool. The tool itself it can be a homegrown data product, data tracking, or there's tons of vendors out there that do something similar.
CRMs, so good stuff.
I would say for e-commerce, we use Gorgias, Gorgias. That's our customer service tool. And they have that customer satisfaction survey built in to that product. So that's something you can use if you're, the Zendesk is another one that people use. We really like Gorgias. It integrates with everything so it integrates with our email, it integrates with our Shopify, it integrates with all that stuff. So all of our data is kind of aggregated in that way. Another thing you can do is just in terms of tracking overall engagement, QR codes, landing pages, specific landing pages for specific campaigns, things like that, where you can see kind of how each campaign that you're running or whatever it may be is engaging with people.
Can you explain that a little deeper? So like if you're saying I put out a coupon for this and I am running ads over here on this radio station, Spark FM, or I am doing other things, you would have a separate QR code or coupon code.
Yeah, you would have a dedicated link or a dedicated page that you're sending traffic to. In our case, for the direct mail campaign, we had a QR code on there, so we could track the number of people who came back to the site from that. And that was dedicated to that. So it wasn't like they were getting that, from somewhere else. So we were, very easily able to track how many people actually came back from that. So that's just one example of something that just allows you to kind of track those things easier. And then there's a ton of survey tools that you can use, like SurveyMonkey or anything like that. And then, a CRM would be good if you're having phone calls with people. You just put your notes in the CRM, and that way, if a customer engages with you, in the future, you can look and see what are the notes in there, what is the history with this customer. You can do a lot of that with any customer service tool that you might use. So.
Absolutely. Shelly, did you want to touch on that? All right, great. We are just about halfway through this session, and we wanted to open it up now to Q&A, either from the audience that are live and or the audience that is watching online. So there we go. And then we'll start with you guys because you guys are here. If you had any questions, and we'll get to them later. If not, then I would jump over there. And With so many emails, what are the best practices so a lean startup can ensure that its customers receive and answer customer satisfaction questionnaires? Surveying?
Oh, okay. Um, I think it's very important when you send your surveys.
Mm.
So, for example, do you send your survey as soon as someone comes to visit your site? Because no one's going to answer that survey because they're not really engaged with you yet. You can send a survey immediately after they purchase your product. And they'll be able to tell you about the purchase experience, but they won't be able to tell you anything about the product experience yet. So if I'm thinking about lean startup, like ensuring people actually answer your questions, time it so that way the survey arrives to them as close to the actual experience that you want to measure is. So if you want to measure the delivery experience, have that survey get to them 20 minutes after, 10 minutes after it gets to their door. Or maybe it's a little bit longer. Maybe it's until the end of the day when they actually receive their package. So timing your surveys is very important. The length of your surveys is very important. Don't
Huge,
send 50 question surveys because no one will ever finish it.
Unless you want one response from
That
your
one
mom,
person.
probably, realistically, you know.
No, that was great. What you said is kind of like, when are we sending customer engagement? Sometimes you're, again, like you said, I might have gotten my package and I got a survey. How did you like your package? I've not made it home yet, so I don't know.
Or you don't
And-
even have it yet
Yeah.
because it's not triggered after it's been delivered. So timing is huge. Understanding what metrics you're trying to track. If you want better data, ask better questions. I think is a key thing. Another thing would be if you're just tracking two things, again, length, don't ask 50 questions. Just ask one or two questions that are relevant at that time. So that's why, like for customer satisfaction, it's one question and they could just click on the stars. They don't have to comment back. They can just, oh yeah, 4 stars or 5 stars. Typically you'll get we actually have quite a few people who reply saying, oh, such and such a person was great. They handled it. That's not overly helpful. But it's nice to hear, and it gives positive feedback to, whoever the interaction is with. But those things make it simple, make it easy for people.
I mean, and then the basic for that too is, use one of those actual tools out there for marketing, whether it be a Survey Monkey or a Constant Contact, because those things often give you a lot of data. How many people opened, when they opened, what did they click on? And those are always really great ways to kind of figure out exactly where
Got a question
you
over
want
here.
to go. Go right ahead. In the meantime.
Yeah, there's been a push the last few years and a change from like just brand followings to brand communities. So how do you think about how you build up that community instead of just people following your company?
You can go ahead and start if you want.
It's I know it's very important for Hydro. So we actually there's a lot of organic communities that arose on Facebook, on Reddit, on a little bit on Twitter too. And the best part was those are organic, like the users actually started them to chat with each other. And so our customer service team, we've got like 1 or 2 people who are constantly monitoring those, asking questions. The hard thing is, like, you really want to do that again, even if you set up the Facebook page or the Reddit page, it has to be true to your brand. So it can't just be sales pitchy. It can't just be fake, because then that reinforces why people want to be there. So I really like call out to the people at Hydro that they do a really good job at that, like answering questions or bringing customer service issues in. So that's what's top of mind. Does that kind of partially answer your question? Anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would just say if you're looking at trying to build a community, you could also just engage with existing communities. So you don't necessarily have to build your own, but engage. So, you know, if you find that your customer is already engaged in a specific community, you don't necessarily have to build one from scratch, but you could kind of continuously engage in existing communities, and that's a good way to build brand equity too.
Absolutely. Good. Anybody else from the audience? I got a couple more on what are some of the best practices in creating a marketing funnel?
That is a huge that is a huge question. So we're talking more bottom of the funnel stuff here. So we're talking, so if anybody's familiar with HubSpot, they kind of talk about the flywheel model. And if we're looking at that, this is the retention part. This is not the building of the marketing funnel, but the pieces do go into it. So any of the customer engagement things that you're taking away can help you to build out marketing campaigns that resonate with your customers, because you're looking at reviews and seeing, what are people saying about my product? What do they like? How are they talking about my product? What specific language are they using? So all of the stuff on the customer retention part of it helps with your more quote unquote top of the funnel marketing activities. How are you attracting people? How are you engaging with them? Helps when you talk about all of the retention stuff. So I guess when you look at things like reviews, when you look at the customer issues and you figure out ways to solve them, all of that contributes to your messaging, your copy, and all of that, because you're using customers' language to talk about your product. So I would say that would be one thing I would say.
And I would go a step further and say use the customer reviews and use the UGC, the user generated content in your marketing funnel. So that's, if I had any advice for startups, it's your organic channels, meaning your free, unpaid, your own Facebook, your own Instagram, your own TikTok. Feature the reviews. Reviews are so powerful across any industry, across any company. Feature your members in photos and reels. That is going to be usually more powerful and cheaper than any other, self-made advertising.
That is this. I believe this might be a comment, maybe, and not a question. Customer satisfaction survey engagement is driven by several ways. One, compensation for time. You can give them a $20 gift card. Elevate professionally. Get the client to showcase their expertise in joint press articles, speaking opinions to gain more exposure. Or three, elevate to beta customer status, i.e., they get more say in product development and road mapping. Thank you very much for that, Eric. I hope some. And then Matt, he says, we discovered we have an issue reaching our users via email because they register with work email address, and their IT policies either send our messages to an other folder or don't deliver the email altogether. Any advice on clever ways to reach users when they have email delivery challenges out of their control? That's a good question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have any specific ways to get around people's internal IT spam filters. That's a challenge beyond my scope. One thing I would say, just in terms of when people sign up for any list of any kind, so whether that's they're signing up to receive text messages from you, or they're signing up to receive emails from you, that you make sure that the content that you send them initially is engaging, so that Google will make sure that they're not, putting your stuff to spam, because people are actually opening it and engaging with it. So part of it is just make your content engaging, make it relevant to your customers. Don't always make it salesy. Every email that you send does not need to be a sales email. Send stuff that's valuable, And ultimately, the more you can get people to open your emails, especially for the initial emails that you send, the less likely you are to get stuck in spam filters.
I do remember a different place I worked, we had email deliverability metrics. So there are definitely some vendors out there who can say, out of the 100,000 emails that you sent, 90,000 actually reached their inbox. And some of these tools will even say, and 85% reached their primary inbox versus their spam inbox or their social inbox or their promotion inbox. So it might be worth doing an audit with one of those tools or vendors to see and then they'll also tell you why, what part of it was it your subject line? Was it your image? Maybe you have too many images, or they can guess at or approximate what are the reasons for why you hit spam or something.
You could also look at email deliverability by the email marketing company that you use. So there are metrics out there for deliverability for specific, one thing would be make sure you verify your domain, because otherwise you're sending it from their domain. And so you want to make sure that your domain is not blacklisted on any of these spam filters. I think there are 40 different ones that they could be on these blacklists. So you want to check those kind of things regularly. Making sure that the actual vendor that you're using to send your emails, you don't want to have the cheapest vendor, because if you have the cheapest vendor, they might not have good deliverability. And there's a ton of research, but people will say, oh, MailChimp versus Klaviyo versus, whatever the different email marketing tool that you might use. You can actually see there's research done into, what is their actual deliverability, how many reach the primary inbox, things like that on a per vendor basis. So you can look at those things too.
And the next question that we have from Brianna is pretty much the same thing. What are some of the factors to consider when choosing an email marketing? And I think you just touched on, depending on your business and what you want to see. Do you want to talk a little bit about? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I would say for us, the number one thing is probably deliverability. The number two thing is integrations. So making sure that you're able to track, whether it's purchase history or how they engage with your website or all of those different factors. For an e-commerce business, you can see, a lot of the different email marketing providers will have, you actually click through and you can see a customer and you can see their interactions, or how many emails they opened or things like that. So
a specific one that you personally use, or for the organic batch?
Yeah, I don't want to make any specific recommendations, but
He's not getting paid for any promo.
I'm not getting paid. But like e-commerce, you'd probably want something like Klaviyo, because they have very specific features, kind of based on how people are engaging with e-commerce. I don't know if it's different for,
I think it would be similar for our type of business. A couple things also that come to mind are I'm really big into analytics. I love seeing data, and I know the specific data cuts that I want to see. Some tools have those data cuts, others don't. Some tools have APIs where you can do your own data cuts, others don't. So that would be important for me. If I'm actually thinking also back to how complicated you want your emails to be. So for example, when I was at HBR, one of the primary products of HBR was newsletters. So we would send out, we had 20 different types of newsletters, each at different cadences, each to a different type of audience. And so it was really important there to have a tool that could facilitate these complicated email flows. So most startups aren't going to have that unless you're really unless you're a content startup. But that could be another important consideration when choosing an email vendor.
Very basic speaking, a lot of these websites that people are building nowadays have email marketing built into them as well, that do have a lot of connectability to Shopify's or any other sales thing. So that, I think you touched on it earlier, what are the integrations that come with the marketing tool or resource that you're using? And then this always sounds like a very crass answer for everything, but Google, like if you type in what are the best resources for email marketing, they will rank them for you and literally spell out what each and every one of them do and allow you to pick them. Some of them are free, some of them are not so free. So depending on your business, you got to make that choice based on what you need.
And there are also a lot of review aggregator websites that you can look at, basically reviews of software products. So Capterra, G2 are a couple that come to mind where you can actually see reviews of software products. It's kind of like Yelp for software, basically.
And look for user-friendly apps too, because sometimes you're reading those and you're like, I don't know what this is. So that's not the one for you. But I think that we are just about at our time. Given that most companies are currently using LinkedIn as a source of finding new leads, what are the clever strategies you are using to stand out? And I will end it on that one. That's a good one.
We're not using LinkedIn, but I do think we should be. I think that's a good opportunity. So not everyone.
Yeah.
Clever strategies to stand out. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts right off the top here?
I don't know if there's any clever ones on LinkedIn, but TikTok seems to be where everybody's going these days for cleverness.
I guess it depends on. I know that there's a lot of organic engagement on LinkedIn. I think just sharing things about your industry on LinkedIn is helpful. I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I should be, but my partner is very active on LinkedIn. So, sharing industry news, sharing places that you might have been featured. People are really, typically if you have a good network, people are very supportive and they'll, they'll engage with your content on LinkedIn. It kind of goes across the board on all social media.
We were actually proposing, so we're an at-home fitness machine. We have not used LinkedIn yet, but my proposal was we should be using LinkedIn to target people who work from home, because that's primarily our core audience.
That's what everybody does when they're working from home anyways, is work
know.
out.
Yeah, right? I hope so. You should do it more.
Eat.
So that was going to be my clever strategy, but maybe you already knew that, Sasha. So yeah.
That's awesome. So we are just about the end of this session. So any last minute questions or last minute pieces of advice from our companies up here about what you can do to engage with your customers and keep them there?
I'm going to come from the data analytics point of view and say, measure good quality data and monitor it closely and come up with action strategies of what you're actually going to do. So you need all three of those: quality, over time, and action, because any one of those is meaningless without the other.
Great.
That's great advice. And the only thing I would add to that, because that's perfect, and I probably would have said something similar to that in terms of tracking metrics, but also just actually have real conversations with your customers. You'll get a lot more information than you would expect. And you'd be surprised at what, one single piece of feedback can make a difference to, hundreds or thousands of customers. So, beyond just the data, also, try and have real conversations and engage with customers.
Thank you both so much. This has been a very, very great infotainment and educational panel. I learned a lot, and I'm hoping that you guys learned a lot too. And we'll turn it right back over to you.